Hello, 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 hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good times, whatever time it is and wherever you are listening. Joined with me, as always, Mr. Chris Cute.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm running a little bit late, and as I sort of said before, probably before the bit where you cut off to edit, but as the people listening live will no doubt know, I'm a little bit late. And talking of late and saying and doing silly things, it's Jamie Page.
How you doing?
Oh dear, oh dear.
Uh-huh.
So, as always,
here we go again.
Tonight's show is brought to you in part by Yorkshire Grit, the Woodturners Abrasive Paste, our good friend Chad at Mancrafting, Pam from Highland Boxes, and our good friend Steve Neelan from Harneal Media, who does all the kind of internet-y stuff in the background and the foreground and off to the flanks as well. Sorry, Jamie, but no more credit for you. If you want to find out more about the sponsors, genuinely, 100%. I say this hand on heart. If you want to find out about our sponsors, and you really should, because these are awesome people doing awesome things in their own unique fields, then head on over to the website, makesinternationalpodcast.com/sponsors. Phew! I feel like I can come up for air now.
And if you don't mind me saying, I generally, from the heart, want to say that Pam is an awesome lady. I mean, if you've ever had a chance to speak with her, she's just a very kind, gentle soul. She's just like perfect. I love her.
But there's a reason for that, and it's not just the fact that she's an awesome person. She is from good stock, because if you've ever met her dad, Pam's dad, #Jim's a legend, you will understand why Pam is such an awesome person, because her dad is as well. Absolute top bloke.
Oh, seriously, she really is a nice lady. Anyway, okay. All right, enough of that. So what are we going to talk about this week, boys? It's
well, I thought we could kind of carry on with sort of partly what we were talking about last week with it was Berkey. Last week, wasn't it?
Mr. Berkey,
last week. It's just a blur. About kind of hacking things together and kind of butchering our way through, because I mean, if nothing else, it's kind of a set theme, because I managed to butcher through the intro to this podcast every single week.
It's called, but we call that winging it, but I guess you could call hacking it. Yeah, it could be hacking.
Managed to cobble most things together out of pretty much nothing for the last few years. So I genuinely, I think it's going to be kind of a good topic, because I know there's some good questions that sort of come out from the Facebook group, and no doubt we'll get onto those. But I have to say up front, Chris, and Jamie as well, I'm not a huge fan of the sort of, not the term and not the actual physical thing of kind of hacking, but the connotations that it sort of generates and creates. Do you know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah. I understand that, because not all hacks have to be that kind of sloppy, my God, this is a disgusting mess kind of thing. They actually do make sense sometimes. Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, it's a bit like the the old saying, "Jack of all trades, master of none," sort of thing. That without going into too much detail, that's only half the story, and there's a big long end to that, which makes more sense. Although calling someone a jack of all trades has those negative connotations, and I don't know. It kind of doesn't sit right with me all the time. That it can be a good thing as well. Because if it works, it works, and that's all that matters.
Well, I mean, that just shows creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
I know it was a movie, but you could look at the DeLorean from Back to the Future as a hack. I mean, it had a Mr. Fusion thing on the back. You just cobble loads of stuff put together.
I love that movie. It's like,
and it went back in time.
That's how Mr. Coffee developed over the years.
Sometimes, Jamie, I wish we could go back in time, but
about 5 years or so,
and just not do this podcast at all. Just go, that's a terrible idea. We shouldn't do it.
No, that's not. No, not at all. Maybe like 5 minutes.
Invite Jamie.
5-minute intervals. Like, oh God, I wish. Why do we have to? Couldn't we just redo that bit and pretend it never happened?
If we recorded this like most podcasts do, and if we didn't do it live, then we could do that. But alas, we bear our souls, however ugly they may be.
I mean, kind of the reason I sort of brought this up to you guys in our little Facebooky group where we sort of chat about the things that we might want to talk about on the show is I was literally just cobbling together a few things to do something that I needed to do, and it reminded me of what Berkey was saying about basically sort of cobbling things together and all the rest of it. And literally, as I was doing it, I'd got like like the little red guy and the little white guy.
Yeah,
it was the little red guy and Berkey. Or was it? No, it was a little white guy and Berkey, obviously.
That's scary stuff right there. I'm telling you right now, because I'm not sure Berkey has a white guy, but okay, go ahead.
on Berkey's shoulder, there's like another little Berkey.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. Nobody will care.
I spent a few... Like, Kat's got this old... Jamie, you would have seen it, actually, no doubt when you popped over. He's got this old teak garden bench in the back garden that was... There was a Nana and Grandad's. It was given to her granddad as like a retire. I think it was a retirement gift from where he used to work, or if it wasn't, it was. It doesn't really matter. It's got one of these. It's a sentimental thing rather than anything else. And it got some broken portions to it over the years. It's had a bit of a pounding, needed some repairs, blah blah blah. So I was just in the middle of fixing this bench up, sanding it down, refinishing it, and there's some broken slats that needed repaired. But you know, like on a garden bench, how the vertical slats are mortised into
the top slats,
the basically the rails and the stiles for the back panel you couldn't get them out without basically taking the whole thing apart. It was because those slats fit into the top and bottom of the back's mortised into the sides held together with the seats, and it would have been a nightmare. So I ended up, because this slat, it hadn't completely... when you snap a stick in half and it doesn't break into two parts, it just kind of... The fibres go to mush and it just sort of bends in half.
Right.
It had done that. And rather than kind of push it open a bit more, splodge in a load of glue and then clamp it flat, it had happened too long ago. It was all dirty and grubby in between where the fibres had split. So it basically just completely had to come out. So I broke it out completely. It pulled out the mortises nicely, and then I had to kind of cut away half a Dutchman to expose one side of the mortise to turn it into a half lap.
You were able to pull that out of the mortise?
Yeah. So basically,
wasn't done very well to begin with. If that
no, it was. So the slat was mortised into the top and bottom of the back. Okay, I'm just saying it's highly unusual to be able to do that. Normally you have to cut it off and remortise it.
Yeah, no.
So, sort of. Yeah, basically I did. It was so I managed to snap the whole slat in half, which then broke it into two portions, which meant I could pull the top half out of the top mortise and the bottom bit out of the bottom. But then obviously to get it back in again, I couldn't do that because that would have meant snapping it, and it kind of defies the point of fixing it. So what I had to do was cut away. If you imagine the mortise, so basically turn it into a half lap. So I basically had to cut out one side of the mortise to expose it as a slot, and then
you put a half lap in there.
Well, I basically remade the slat tenoned, but then covered in the cheek of the mortise with basically a Dutchman.
Whatever works. Anyway, go ahead.
So it wasn't a hack job because I did it all really nice and carefully and as neatly as I possibly could. But I didn't have any teak that was long enough to make the slat, so I used a piece of sapele because it was about the closest colour match I could get. It wasn't too bad actually. When you actually look at it, it's not too bad.
Over time, you'll be able to tell, but right now it looks fine.
Yeah, it looks kind of about 80% okay. Kat couldn't notice, but without sounding smug, to an untrained eye, in sort of air quotes, most people would notice it, but we probably would, sort of thing. Right. So it wasn't too bad. But I actually managed to use the slat as the Dutchman to repair the back, so it was just a little less obvious. And then in the process of doing this and making like the Dutchman bit, like the bow tie bit, which was actually not a bow tie shape but just a half hexagon, I had to shoot it into the mortise to get it actually like a nice tight perfect fit. So rather than just cut it to length, I put it on a shooting board, but because it had got a beveled end, I couldn't use a normal square shooting board, so I had to cut a wedge And this was where the whole, that's a really long story to get to the whole topic.
No, you're getting way too far into this. It's even hard to follow from me, and I'm looking at you talk.
So imagine you've got to, trim a piece of end grain to length, and you put it in a shooting board, and you just shoot off the end with a hand plane. Yeah,
sure.
But you can't do that on an end that isn't square because it doesn't fit at 90 degrees. So the end of this piece of wood is beveled to fit in the Dutchman. Yeah,
got it.
So to put that on a shooting board to trim the end to length,
you got to put it in an angle.
You got to put it in an angle, but you can't just hold it onto a normal shooting board. You've got to have an angled shooting board. So rather than make a whole angled shooting board at some random unknown angle, I just cut a wedge, and this was where the hack went in. So I cut a wedge to basically bodge this square shooting board into a random unknown angled shooting board, so I could shoot the end of this little piece of wood just to fit it in this one hole.
What a pain!
Yes and no. I mean, it kind of sounds.
No, it is.
It sounds more complicated than it actually was. It was just one of those things that you had to sort of think about and go, how am I going to do this? Just to, you just sort of, you spend more time scratching your head, and then you just go, do you know what? Sod this. And then when I've got the wedge, how am I going to hold that on? Because I want to be able to take it off afterwards. So it was just one of those things that was just lots of little bits that sort of came together as sort of a happy accident in a way.
Could you not use that little trick where you put it up against the chop saw, put it up against the blade while it's down, lift it up, turn it on, bring it back down again? So
absolutely, just kind of jam it up to the blade. I could have done.
You could.
That would have been another solution, but the bench was outside, and you
can actually do that on a bandsaw too, Jamie. But you can just do it by shaving it.
Yeah.
So the bench being outside in the garden, and I could have done because I had actually the kit to do that. But me being lazy, I've got to walk like maybe 30 meters, 100 feet from where I'm working to where I've got to go. Imagine doing that each time just for a tiny little. I was like, no chance. That's like a marathon trip to do.
That reminds me. That reminds me of my answer to a question that we have coming up. I can, and I'll make mine really quick. Most of my hacks have to do with refinishing. Whether you know it or not, when I first started woodworking, I got into woodworking, and then I found a love for some reason, people started bringing me their old furniture and going, "Can you fix this?" So I wound up for 5 or 6 years doing nothing but restoring and refinishing furniture, it just as a hobby, and it was fun, And they, paid me mostly in beer or in like, here's Sunday dinner or something. I wasn't doing it for money, but I was learning a lot when I did that. And it was like, have you ever tried to match stain? Oh, here a lady came to me with a table, and she told me this. She knew enough to tell me this. She says, because the top of the table was pretty screwed, and it was a laminate. It was a very thin veneer that was on the top of the table. And she says, the top of the table needs to obviously be redone. Chris, can you do it? And I went, yes. She goes, but
this was a but.
Yeah. But I don't want to lose the patina on the piece. And I'm like, well, I flat out told her
before we scratched it all, love.
I flat out told her, I said, there's no way I can refinish the top of this table without losing that patina. It's just not going to happen because the way I look at it, as deep as that gouge is, it's going to need a new veneer. And I cannot match the patina of the rest of the table. She says, well, can you come close? I said, I'll try if you're willing to go ahead and take this. And if I fail, throw it in the junk. And she goes, well, if it doesn't work with you, then that's pretty much where it's headed. And I went, all right, I got nothing to lose here. So, I mean, that's why I started hacking, trying to match stains and trying to create a patina. And I might have done a 50% decent job on matching the patina. I mean, I got the color right, but you just can't make new look that old, because this was like an old table. I mean, because there's dust and there's dirt and there's grime that builds up that creates that patina on the legs and stuff, and I can't recreate that, but I did the best I could. And so that's the kind of hacks that I'm talking about, and it had to do with refinishing furniture. So it wasn't like I don't have any major tool hacks like Richard did. I mean, I just don't do that. I was born and raised on the, right tool, right job kind of thing. And so typically, not always, but typically, I go get the right tool for the right job. So whatever. Jamie, you got anything? Go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry.
No, I was kind of sort of responding when somebody said in the live chat, cut the splice first and then cut the hole to it. And yeah, that's good advice because you cut the mortise first and then you fit the tenon to it. The reason I was trimming the Dutchman, the splice, the timber bit to go in it is because you can only get so
we're back.
far.
Okay.
That was all. That was all.
No, that's moving on. Jamie, have you done any kind of crazy hacks?
Yeah, I have actually. I actually had to do one more recently, actually. So the side of our house, we've got a gate in it. It very often gets used as a run through for little terrors.
The local toe rags.
The local toe rags as a cut through, and they jump onto the garage at the back or to get to the road behind our house. Well, more recently that happened, and they basically destroyed the fence so they could get through and all that sort of stuff. So, as a temporary, I say temporary in inverted commas because it's probably going to be there for the next 10 years. I actually used some old decking boards, but yeah. So,
well, as in you stood at the bottom of the garden, and every time someone came in, you decked them with a board.
Also, as a device of a decking board, you go twang.
Get out of my garden. Boom.
I actually used some old decking boards, and originally they were treated floorboards, as a fence. But it actually turns out looking better than what it did before. And it's a hell of a lot stronger.
They used floorboards as a fence?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a tough fence. I mean, because those floorboards are made out of pretty dense wood.
These aren't. These are just normal thin things. It was more decorative, really, and even that was kind of even that was a temporary solution.
It's like the
to a massive problem, really.
Like the marine solution to a fence. Hoorah!
So but we need to get a new gate in there. But that's kind of one of the reasons why I've got a security camera in. It only takes one of the little sods to get a little bit curious.
All right, gents, we have questions.
Doberman. That's what you want. You want a Doberman.
We have questions, and this conversation is going to get silly really soon. Because we could go on forever about the stupid things that we've done with hacks. At least I could. I've only confessed to doing restoration hacks, but trust me, I have more. That don't look so nice on my portfolio. But we have questions, so let's get to them. Alan Buxey. Hi, Alan. I think this is the first time Alan's commented it. He says, I have an answer to this, so if you guys want to go first, I'll let you go. What's your best hack for clamping up and holding things for people who don't have many clamps? If you don't have an answer for them, I do.
So I've got one that I used to. I haven't used it in a long, long time, but there was one I used to use a while ago, and you only use a bit of string and a stick. So you
tourniquet.
All right, but think
kind of, yeah. You put So it was used for flat work, and it was used for making frames. So you wrap it around the frame, use a stick, and then you just keep twisting it around and around and around inside. You put the stick inside the knot, and then you just keep twisting it around and around and around until it gets tight, and then you clamp down the stick once it's tight.
Right.
So that way the stick can't unrevolve itself.
Got it. Well, that's cool.
So
I like that.
That was always one.
Only problem with doing that,
there's the wedge one as well.
That was going to be my answer. My answer was basically that: it's blocks and wedges. There isn't anything you can't clamp up with blocks and wedges. Screw a block down onto your workbench or around it, depending on what your clamping thing is. I mean, let's say you're trying to edge glue a bunch of boards together to make a wider board. Let's say you're trying to create a panel. Before you glue your panel ends to get glued together, lay them out on your workbench, clamp some blocks, both left, right, and in the front, and then have something for that, that panel to rest up against at a 90-degree angle in the back, and then you cut a block, you place it about a half an inch or 3/4 of an inch away from your workspace, and then you cut another block that's just kind of a free floating block that's going to sit between the one that's stationary and the one that's not, and then you cut some wedges and you put the floating block up against your workpiece, and you wedge the wedges between the floating block and the one that you have screwed down, and you've got a perfect clamping solution. And the only thing that you need to be careful of, it's the same thing with that string tip, is people seem to think they need to put like Titanic pressure on something in order to get something clamped up. You don't need a ton of pressure when you're clamping things, guys. You need to make sure you've got it tight enough to see a little squeeze out of glue, and then you know what, you're fine. You don't need to clamp beyond that. You don't need to tighten it down like if it, you know, it's gonna, if you don't tighten this valve down, it's gonna burst water all over your home. You don't need to do that. It's just you're gluing wood together. It's not that big of a deal. And so then you use the wedges on either side of the block that's stationary and the floating one, and you tap them in from both sides, and you've got perfect clamping solution, and it's cheap.
So I was going to say a quick question for both of you two about gluing up. Are you one of the guys that does glue one side or glue both surfaces?
I do one side because I think both sides is redundant. It's stupid. I mean, you're gonna force the glue in no matter what you're doing. I mean, I can see wiping down one side and then finger cleaning it just to fill the voids and then doing it. But I've never had a problem with just gluing one side. It's like both sides is just, you're wasting glue at that point in time, and you're cleaning up too much mess.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird one, this. And again, if you were really that sort of way inclined or
I'm not that anal.
Crazily minded. You could debate about this, and people do. You know, there are billions of videos on YouTube. The Scientology of glue and all the rest of it. But generally, whatever. I don't really, to be honest, don't really give it that much thought. I will always glue both sides if I'm veneering.
Oh, that would make sense.
That's about the only thing, just to get a bit of moisture into the veneer, and it's a bit easier to work.
But it's a thin layer of glue. You're not talking about putting on massive layers of glue and then trying to squish them together. You're talking about a thin layer on each side and then clamping it down. Right.
For that instance, I tend to use a sponge roller for gluing big flat expanses like panels and stuff. If I'm doing a rub joint to glue up a panel, like a solid panel, I'll generally just put glue on one side, and then I put the two together. And when you rub it and pull it apart, you've got glue on both sides anyway.
Exactly.
Which generally doesn't get pretty much any clamping, actually, because there's enough from the suction, the vacuum that you form by rubbing it together, hence the reason it's called a rub joint, that you don't really need any kind of clamping pressure because it holds itself there.
Unless you need to hold it in place, or you want it in a particular form or fashion, and then you might want to clamp it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, unless you've got to move it, I mean, if you're fortunate enough that you can just do that, leave it on a table and just walk away, then do that and walk away. But if you've got to move it to somewhere out of the way, lean it up against the wall or whatever, then the clamps are going to stop it from flopping around and falling apart. A good one is just a simple heavy thing. The amount of times I've used just the heavy toolbox with extra heavy things chucked in it to hold things down. you just be amazed, like bricks and breeze blocks. And
I use my vise all the time because I keep my vise portable in my shop, and I always use that. That's a great 10-pound weight, just right in the middle.
Toolboxes.
An old trick that I've never used it myself, but I've seen it done a couple of times, is actually an old hose pipe, like not like a garden hose that's only like 3/4 inch diameter, but like a fire hose, like the ones that they have on the fire engines that
when they have cloth, it's actually cloth around it.
Yeah, so when you fill those up, they expand and they get rock hard when they're full of water. If you can get water into those and pressurize them, and actually a lot of old joinery shops used to use this technique, where you'd basically create a box frame. And you could, predominantly in veneer pressing, because they didn't have enormous industrial veneer presses, you could basically make up a kind of a box frame with a platen, and then you have an extra platen, and between the two you sandwich a hose pipe, and then you pump water into and pressurize that, and it just, like imagine like a balloon,
Right.
but on a much stronger scale.
Yeah.
You
But
get
then again,
insane pressures with that.
Yeah, that's extraordinary pressure, and that kind of extraordinary pressure really isn't needed in woodworking. You really don't need that kind of extraordinary pressure.
Yeah, I think the only time you really are getting into some insane pressures is going to be veneering to keep things flat, because you've got to get it over such a massive area that instantly increases the amount of pressure you need.
And if you're worried about that, there's something to be said for contact cement too in veneering, if you actually want to use it. But you got to be not a lot of people choose that because you don't have a lot of correction time, as in you have no correction time. You have one chance to lay that piece, one chance and one chance only, so a lot of people don't use it, but it's actually worth doing. Next question is actually from our resident inquisitor, and Andy, once again. Mr. Pugh, thank you for chiming in. We do appreciate it, my friend. I appreciate you being part of this podcast, because you certainly are. Have you ever made a tool, and what was it?
So I've made a couple of mallets. The very first thing I ever made on the lathe was a mallet. I've still got it. I actually made Richard a mallet from an old bowling pin. I don't know if he's still got it there.
I have. Just bear with.
Yeah, I made that for him. I've actually got a very small ruler that I'm planning on making a bevel gauge with.
Really?
Yeah. I've got some nice pieces of wood, so I'm planning on. That's going to be my first, I guess, proper woodworking tool. I guess you could say I'm going to make.
Okay.
But yeah, that's really about it, to be honest. I've often looked at thinking, how can I turn... I've got like a... Let's see, I've got it up behind me. Well, I did have. Yeah, I have. So I've got this... I bought this ages and ages ago at a car boot sale. People over on SoundCloud, you have to go over to YouTube to watch it about 30 minutes and 39 seconds in. I actually bought a mini vice.
Oh, a little guy.
I was going to take out the insides and turn it, use it all out of wood, and basically make a little mini wooden vice, like try and copy John Heiss a little bit.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've had that for a few years. Yeah, that's about it. That's all I've really done.
Well, I've made a lot of shop tools, but I don't call I've made a lot of beam squares and circle finders and all that kind of stuff. I mean, actually, when you say tool, I think like metal tool, something that involved. And the only thing I can think of is when I first moved here, I had to. The first thing I did was remodel one of our bathrooms, and you'll understand why, because the bathroom. I don't know if anybody is even old enough to remember this phase that some people went through. Yeah, like eons ago. I'm talking back in the 60s.
Where's this going, Chris?
60s and 70s, where the bathroom was decorated in pink and gray. There was a real renaissance of people wanting to do everything in pink and gray back in the day. And we bought the house, and the guest bathroom was done in that pink and gray. And obviously, we walked in and went, "Oh no, this needs to change." So, here's my problem. I was ripping out the basin sink in this thing because I was just gonna, I was gonna pull it out, try to salvage it, sell it to a reseller for like $10, which is what I basically ended up getting for it. But anyway, in order to disassemble this sink, because quite honestly, it would have been better to take a sledgehammer to the sink than do what I did. But you know at the bottom of the basin where the drain is, and there's a big old friggin' nut down there that holds the basin securely to the bottom of the sink, or the drain to the bottom of the sink, so that it doesn't leak and the water actually drains down the drain. Well, this one had a really weird nut on it that was not. Let's just say I didn't have the tool to loosen this nut. But by God, I was determined to get that nut off today, one way or another. And I ended up having to figure out how to get that. I went out and I went down to my shop, grabbed a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, and I made my own open-ended wrench that would fit that nut. And I made an open-ended wrench that actually ended up loosening that nut so I could get it off. So that's
Nice.
that's the only way, in that, which wasn't really hard to do. I mean, it took me up and down the stairs several times to get the cut on the bandsaw quite right to get this wrench right. But I finally got it right, and then it worked. I mean, it took it off. So, hey, win-win. I mean, it was a hack, but it was better than going to the store and going, I need something that's about this, because I had no idea what size it was. It's like I had no idea what that was. I just was glad to be done with it. So that's what I did. It was easier for me to go make the tool than it was to go buy it.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I have a bit of a confession to make because I actually saw Andy's question earlier in the day, and so I have assembled for I won't go through all of them, but over the years I've made loads of tools, and a bit like Chris, not just like circle finders and center finders and dividers, wooden kind of jig type, actual metal tools. The first ones we had to make loads when we were students, including the toolbox to put them in. And the only one I've still got of those, which actually is not immediately to hand, I had it just, here we go, before we came on to the show, is a toolmaker's clamp, which is a bit like the wooden hand screws, but they're
those are nice. Those are
in metal. And originally, when I was a student, I never blued them. I only recently blued those, and you can, if you're watching closely, you can see it's got some rust on the threads there because I was lazy and I didn't derust it properly. But it's got real crude tool marks in it and little dents and kinks where I slammed the mill into the stock at far too high speed, and it's all nice and rough and ready and all the rest of it. But this is probably the most thing I've got a bit of love for, because it's the one tool that I managed to make and put my name on, actually stamped my name into it. So it's literally a piece of me.
Richard, I have 2 of those in my shop, a small one and one that's a little bit larger. And I never use them because I'm not a tool maker. But my grandfather worked for a tool company, and he was a tool worker. He worked as a machinist, and he made those for himself for his job. And I ended up inheriting them after he passed away. Went from him to my father, then eventually to me, and I've kept them for the same reason. It's just sentimental more than anything else. I mean, I don't use them because I don't. That's not my trade. But they're actually cool. They're actually cool the way they work.
Not only are they cool, but they put some insane pressure out. Even the real tiny ones, they will grip like a beast. Those metal toolmakers clamps. And so will the wooden ones. Actually, they're a bit honky on those. I kind of went through a bit of a phase last year or maybe the year before.
I think I remember seeing you making some of them.
So I did a couple of saddle squares and just little things. And it was a sort of a brass and offcuts of hardwood phase I went through. That's a saddle square for marking out the hinge points and the cup locations for concealed Euro hinges or cupboard doors.
Nice.
Which what I love about doing this is not about the fact that you're kind of tinkering around and making stuff. It's that when you go into a job and you're working and the client brings you a cup of tea and a biscuit and they see these things that you've made out of super shiny brass that you're using to make, they love it. People absolutely love it. And I did a sliding bevel. That's my favourite tool that I use pretty much all the time, out of a 4-inch ruler and a bit of hardwood and some, again, that was my kind of brass and hardwood fetish coming through there. But and it wasn't going to be my shout out, but I might just shout it out again because I've done it before. There is a channel, and I'll have to look it up because I forget the name. The guy makes boats and he makes loads of tools to do. But Jamie, you'll like this one. This is probably my favourite. I bet you haven't made a scroll saw, have you? Because I've made a router.
No, I can go one better though.
I like that. That's a little dado cutter.
I'll go one better.
Yeah, it's a little mini router plane. You didn't make
an electric
that.
one.
You bought that. You cheat.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Next question is:
Go make tools. Sorry, Kit. I'm going to jump in. People should make more stuff like that themselves.
Yes,
It's so rewarding.
That's why the next question is pertinent. That's why I want to jump into it. He says, "Why?" Andy asks, "Why make it rather than just go out and?"
There's the mallet that I made for Richard out of a bowling pin.
Okay, there you go.
Excuse the bloodstains on it.
That
I dropped it on my toe.
what was once a perfect segue has now become weird. Andy's question was, why make it rather than buy it? My answer to Andy was expediency, because it took less time to make it than it would take me to go to the store and buy it. I mean, that's if you know what you need and you know that you have the products around to make what you want, and it's going to take you less time and, let's be honest, less money to do it than it will take you to get in your car and drive to the store and buy one. And then I will do it. I mean, that doesn't differ from my right tool for the right job mentality, because I just make the right tool for the right job. I just do it. It's not, but it's expediency. But what about you guys? Why make it rather than buy it?
I'll let Jamie dive in on this because
I think it also gives you a bit of a boost inside knowing that I made this and it works. You know, it's so that's always a plus.
There's always a bit there.
But I mean, I'm going to kind of take it from a different direction as well. So I own a lot of tools made by members of the community. You know, just to name a couple: Duresta, Jacko, Tony Relu, just to name a few. And I don't use any of them.
Mm-hmm.
They hang not because they don't work, because they do. It's a case of I don't want to use them. They're kind of how you're using them. They're like trophies to a certain degree. You know, I don't want to ruin them. I probably won't ruin them, but I don't want to ruin them. You know, for a lot of, like, for example, you were talking about that clamp. It's more.
It has more affection with it than it does actual use.
Yeah,
right, I got you.
It's kind of like the very first bowl I ever turned. Like I would never sell that. You know,
right?
I've still got the very first scroll saw piece I've ever done. You know, I would never sell that. You know, I don't think I'd ever use the very first tool I ever made.
It has sentimental value, and that's why
it would probably sit up on my shelf.
What about you, Richard?
I have very divisive, mixed, and bipolar reactions to this.
Why am I not surprised? Go ahead.
No, but they're all from a place of love and harmony. Because genuinely, I see it from both sides. I see it from the tradesman side. Why would I waste an afternoon making a hinge jig for 3 positions of 3-inch butt plate hinges of an afternoon of a weekend when I could be spent playing golf or with my family,
right?
When I could just go and buy one and it's paid for and you've got it all the time, blah blah blah. From a purely financial time investment perspective, I'm 100% go buy the hinge jig, go buy the letterbox jig. But even though they're really simple to make and knock up, why bother? You know,
time is money, and
absolutely.
Gotcha.
From the other side of the fence, if it was, say, you, Jamie, and you were hanging a door, say you needed to rehang your bedroom door for argument's sake, and you've, God forbid, you were going to pick up a router and do that, then absolutely it's totally not worth your while to basically waste a single penny on buying a hinge jig, because they are so simple and you could knock one up, and because you're probably never going to need it again, you know?
Yeah.
And also, if you're doing that sort of thing because you enjoy doing it, then make the thing, practice your skills, enjoy the process of making it in order to do the thing you're trying to do, and yada yada, and down the road. So why would I sit and make a tool to deliberately go and use on a job that the clients love to see and have commented on loads of times? That's the kind of divisiveness, because I see that from both sides. I kind of sit in a weird spot to most tradesmen, I think. in that I don't want to really say this and sound negative to tradesmen, but I enjoy what I do, and I kind of feel lucky and privileged in so much as I don't feel like I do it for a job, even when it's my job. I actually enjoy making random things of the weekend. So it, for me, has the pleasure of actually making something, and then that goes back into what Jamie was saying. It's
a therapeutic use that you have future use for. That makes total sense. Next question. Let's move on. What about modifying tools? And Andy, I'm gonna assume this question means taking a tool and physically modifying it, because your next question is the different one. What about modifying tools? As far as I'm concerned, Andy, I mean, outside of sharpening my fair share of screwdrivers because I needed a chisel, I honestly don't modify a lot of the tools I have. I don't get into the guts and change the tool. I mean, but I'm guilty of sharpening flat-end screwdrivers in the past so I could notch out something that I needed just because I didn't have a chisel at hand. I mean, I've done that, but outside of that, I really don't do it. But what about you guys? Have you ever modified the tool?
Yeah, well, more recently, I've changed one of my easy wood tools from a standard tip to a negative rake.
Jimmy, that's not modified. It was intended. The negative rake was intended. What? Okay. Why did I ask him, Richard? Have you ever modified any tools?
Yeah,
Jamie, you are what we call in the States a panty waist. All right, Richard, go ahead. Go
ahead. I mean, go back to the screwdriver. The amount of flathead screwdrivers that I have filed and resized to fit a specific screw in a door is unreal. And they end up going mostly getting lost, and 6 months later going, I never used that, and getting rid of it anyway. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that need fettling. Like, I mean, just a simple hand plane. You take out a number 2 bastard or mill file to a hand plane to take off the corners, the sharp corners, so you don't trush the adjacent sides of boxes. You file up the heel, or
but you never modified the plane to do something it wasn't intended for.
No, I've seen people. I haven't done it myself, but I've seen people drill and tap holes in the side of a jack plane to mount like a wooden handle so that sticks up that you can hold to use on a shooting board. One thing I did actually quite a long time ago now, and it's taken me that long to do it. I bought a cheap brand of cordless router, and I didn't really modify it, but I created an extra piece that you can see here in black to take a different brand of battery to power it, so I didn't have to have another set of batteries. So I've got this, although the actual, if I can get it off now because it's a bit stiff, as is the device. So it's the original tool, right. But I actually created, modelled, 3D printed and electrified and made all the little brackets inside terminals so that it will convert from one battery type to another.
What battery? I have to ask, what battery type have you converted it to use?
Hikoki or Metabo HBT.
I figured.
Because why carry loads of different batteries and chargers if you don't have to? I've modified.
You 3D printed that, right?
Yes, yeah. It's PETG, whatever that is. PET with the, I think it's glycerin or glycol additive. I don't know. I'm not a 3D printer person, but yeah, it's 3D printed.
Well, you knew enough to do it, so that's good enough.
But it works, but it's not pretty, and it's a bit dodgy because it's. I don't know if you probably hear it.
Is it rattly? Yeah, it's rattly. It's
rattly. There's a tolerance of play. It's not quite an interference fit. It doesn't rub too much.
All right.
So you can get halfway through a job and it just cuts out. Oh no!
Richard, joking aside, there was actually I have actually done a bit of modifications. So I actually modified some little Allen wrenches to actually do some really miniature turn-ins with. So I actually put them in a wooden handle and ground it down, and actually made some like really like miniature little lily pots and little mini bowls. I think I showed you them, Chris, on a hangout before.
Yeah, you did. Actually, you did. You're right. And you that's right, you did. You used Allen screws for that? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I've done that with Allen screws. I've done that with Allen screws and a Bradle as well. Like I took the point off and put it to like a scraper.
Yeah, that was like, and you turned those little itty bitty bowls with those things.
Yeah.
That was cool. All right, what
Have you ever on your turn-ins used a spanner, or for you, Chris, a wrench? And
No, but I've seen people do that. So that gives people the perfect size, like diameter for spindle working.
Yeah.
I haven't used, Richard. I haven't. When I first got my lathe, because I mean, you have to understand me and lathes. I worked with a lathe when I was in high school, and a little while afterwards, because I had access to that shop, and then I hadn't touched a lathe for 20 some odd years until I got the one that I have now. And prior to me getting actual, can't remember, name escapes me, the calipers. Prior to getting actual calipers, I used an adjustable wrench to discover when I was at the right thick. No, because I was doing spindle work. I was doing spindle work, and I had to get it down to something. I used an adjustable wrench for that. So, but I mean, I haven't ever actually used a wrench to turn with. So, if that was your question, no, I've never done that.
Yeah.
Let
it be known when the woodturner done it first.
It's one of those things that I look at and think that's a really cool idea, and I've seen lots of people do it. But then I also see the kind of, and I don't want to be derogatory, but people who think I'm not going to do that, it looks a bit dangerous to me, and I'll openly discuss that point of view in public, sort of people.
Right.
For every one person that I see use a spanner to set a tenon diameter, I think chair makers use it loads because they can go, I've got half-inch drill bit and half-inch spanner. Those two are going to work together perfectly and be really easy. There's always like 100 people who are on the other side of the fence.
All right, we got two more questions to go to, and we're almost done here. So, and we had a lot of requests for people to give us them our hacks, and boy, I have an entire list, but we're not going to be able to get to it today. Sorry, guys. Let's get these questions out of the way. What about modifying tools in different ways? And Andy, that's Andy's next question. It doesn't mean actually modifying the tool, but using a tool, not messing with the tool, but using it in a manner that it wasn't probably initially intended for. Have you? This is called hacking. This would be a hack with a tool. You take a router, you turn it, right side up and turn it into a shaper. There are a lot of hacks you can do. I mean, stick a handheld router in a vise and use it that way. I mean, that's not suggested. And by any way, I would never suggest doing that, but I've seen people do it.
It's the old classic Nyrex tin opener, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the classic.
I've used a hammer as a screwdriver many times.
You used a all right. Once again, Jamie is the Depends underwear of the podcast.
I'll tell you what. Here's something. It's just popped into my head. I saw it. You see these, and it's completely relevant, Chris. So I make no apologies. You see these little quick videos. They're like basically advertising videos with no sound. It's just all like super sped up, like bazillion speed of somebody doing something, and it's I don't know this tool is taking the world by storm. Woodworkers won't believe this new tool. And
oh god, yeah.
It was one of these.
They're associated with Wish.
Yeah, and TED as well. I think.
I don't know that, but I'm just going. It's about where you're thinking that.
But it was when you make pellets for plugging screw counterbores. Yeah, it's like
Say again.
So you get like a drill, a pilot bit, clearance bit, countersink, counterbore, drill bit, all in one.
Right.
Okay. And then with those, that you can get a plug cutter, which cuts a little. You put it in the drill, and you drill with it, and it cuts around the outside, and it leaves you with like a little pellet that fits perfectly into the
hole. Yep, counterboard hole. Right. Got it.
Guy was using one of those because there's two sorts. There's two with like the 4 fingers that just kind of claw through, and there's one that's more of a tube with a cutout on the side and a sharp tip. Okay. He was using the kind of the tube type, and he basically cut this effectively what would have been a plug, but around a nail that had been buried in a piece of timber that was holding onto another bit, like a pallet slat into one of the bearers. Yeah,
right.
And he cut this plug around the nail, on both the nails, and it just destroyed the wood around the nail, left the nail completely untouched, and he just took the board off. Like, just took it off. There was nothing holding it there because it just. And I was like, wow, why have I never seen this before? That's such a cool idea. And they were selling it as like a denailing tool, but it was literally just a little plug cut. I was like, I've got loads of those in the workshop that I never use. That's such a cool idea. I'm going to start carrying one.
Yeah.
Pete's from Pete Twisted Trees is the most troublesome alternative tool use that he's seen of things he's found in the kitchen. And brother, you are not wrong about that. But I mean, the different subject. We're going to move on. For me, a pretty typical modification for a tool depending on what like everybody else in the free world who just couldn't afford an edge sander. I've taken my handheld belt sander, built a jig for it, and turned it into an edge sander. Because you grab if you need to know your own specific tool, you build a jig for it, turn it at 90 degrees, and it no longer is a handheld belt sander. It's now a 90-degree belt sander. I've done that, and that was something that was never intended to do. But I mean, I'm not the first. I mean, God, I'm probably like the 1,000,000th person to ever have done that. But that's as far as I go, as far as actually modifying the use of a tool. I get kind of, when things start to get start seeming a little sketchy to me about, whether it's using a jigsaw or things that can cut my fingers off, I tend to not do them. It's just, call it on being on the safe side. Maybe Safety Sally is looking out for me. I don't know. But outside of that, the only other thing I've ever done is I've used my radial arm saw. I have a radial arm saw in my shop, and I've used it to backstory real quick. I used to make a lot of rustic furniture, and I still would like to get back into doing that because I really enjoyed the process. But I would get these slabs of like either tree stumps or whatever it was. It was just a big circular piece of rustic wood that was just, it looked like, a lumberjack had cut one side, then cut a slice off it, and I got the cookie. But they were never level and they were never straight. So I used to use I threw a dado blade on my radial arm saw, and I used to use the radial arm saw to level the top. And, you have to get it into a sled. You get the blank into a sled. You level the sled as best you can to eye level using a level. And, you put some wedges in there, hot glue it down so it doesn't move. And then you start pulling it through. And once you get one side level, you can pull it off that whole freaking contraption, lay it over, and level the other side. And I've done that with a radial arm saw and a dado blade before. And that machine was certainly never intended to do that. But, not having a 25-inch freaking planer, that was about the only alternative I had.
It never ceases to amaze me, actually, the diversity of things like that.
Yeah.
But also it's almost a bit of, sometimes I look at it, I'm like, so it's okay to, I don't know, put a hot glue some bits of wood onto a piece of plywood and then put a cookie through in your case, a radial arm saw, and it's fine to put some straps around an angle grinder. That's the classic one as well, isn't it?
I don't want to say what I'm doing was fine, and that everybody should go ahead and do that without any worries. Because I'm telling you, it is sketchy, but it's not so sketchy that I personally was afraid of doing it.
And that's the thing. But you get, I mean, I see a lot of comments from people, because I think Facebook's a good place to see these kind of more extravagant alternative uses for tools. Is that
meaning things that could kill you, put you on the Darwin list?
But I mean, there's I know the classic one for me that's sort of deemed as being okay is the making a table saw fence at an angle and using the blade to cut coves. Yeah, I 100% can see that, and I can see how that works, and I can see how it's safe.
It would work, and it is safe. It actually, if you know, here's the caveat: if you know what you're doing.
100%. But I mean, the one that always gets me that people think is like complete lunacy is the turn your angle grinder into a metal cutting chop saw.
No.
But then, actually, that is kind of safe as well if you're happy doing it and you know what you're doing. Do you see what I mean? It can be.
Well, if you know what you're doing, and as long as you're secure in the fact that abrasive disc you have on that angle grinder is secure enough to handle the work, that's fine. But I've seen those abrasive discs that cut metal explode on people, and it's just.
100%, yeah.
You just do not want to mess with that. That would in your mind it seems fine as long as you know what you're doing. In my mind, I'm never doing that. No friggin' way.
Is that any more dangerous than using an Arbortech disc?
No, but Arbortech doesn't use discs. Mostly.
What about one of them chainsaw ones that come from, I don't know, what was it, Belgium or something like that, or Russia or something like that?
No, the King Arthur chainsaw disc. Yeah.
No, it weren't King Arthur. It was that other company. I can't remember. Tim Sway used one once. The Russian ones have got fireworks that come out of it as well, and you've got to be drunk to use it. But I can't remember who it was. Tim Sway used it. It was.
I remember it. You're right. You're right. I remember it.
It was lethal.
And he just thought that's sketchy as hell. I'm not doing that anymore.
Because Tim Sway's left-handed, isn't he? And it wouldn't work left-handed, so he was kind of cock-handed doing it.
And there, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jamie. Actually, regardless of what the tool is, what country that tool is being used in, because that's another one that kind of gets people going. Is if you see a guy in a particular part of the world doing a particularly kind of iffy thing, then people like to jump on it and start, spewing, you're going to kill everyone and you shouldn't be doing this because you're, advertising bad practice and shame on you. Whereas if the same practice is being done in, let's say, a particular popular YouTube woodworkers workshop who's used to making, renowned for making intricate and kind of, then people like, oh, that's really cool. And
no. I don't care. I don't care. When you take something, you look at it, and you're the one that all of a sudden says, I'm going to try that. You at the end of the day, and I'm going to be real harsh about this. You at the end of the day are the one that is doing it, and if you have a tinge of caution that maybe I shouldn't try this, then you should not try it.
Absolutely.
Because you just do not have the capability to do it. And you should admit that to yourself, get over your freaking ego, and just go, I'm going to put this down, and I may come back to it in my future. But I'm telling you, just because you watched somebody do it, and you went, oh, well, he made it look so easy. No, ultimately, at the end of the day, you are the one who went out and freaking did it. He
100% agree with that, Chris. 100%, and that's kind of what Jamie was saying. Sort of when you're doing it a bit cack-handed, you think, well, that's as soon as you sort of start getting yourself in a bit of a twist, you're like, whoa.
If you don't have enough common sense to back off, then you're a freaking idiot, and I don't want to hear from you. I mean,
basically. but again, when you kind of you see these sort of videos online, and then you have a quick look through the comments, you see
the idiots.
Yeah, but you see these comments from like, that's really dangerous and you should be ashamed of yourself for even showing people or giving people the idea to do this. And you think,
no, bull.
There's this old boy, but that's the reality of it, though, isn't it? And you see these things.
Well, that's what you get. I mean, they get that from people, but it's easy to ignore it because you look at me going, you know what, you're just ignorant. I'm not even going to pay attention to you. Goodbye. All right, we got to end this, guys. I'm sorry. We could carry on with this conversation. This is a podcast and a half. We could carry on with forever. I mean, because we haven't
typical Berkey can open worms everywhere.
Well, thank you, God, that guy. It's time to let Jamie sing. So let's get that going.
Jamie, you know it is.
Do it.
Right, it's time for Jamie's page. So,
Dear Lord.
this episode is brought to you in part by the man that doesn't like to do things the same as everybody else, Mr. Dale Kirkwood.
Hey, Dale.
He actually surpassed 1,200 subscribers today. He didn't like to celebrate passing 1,000, so 1,200 it is. So congratulations to Dale. If you're not subscribed to Dale, go and subscribe to Maple Tree Studios and check out his awesome scroll saw work.
Dale, I appreciate the fact that you didn't want to celebrate the 1,000 like everybody else, but 1,200. Let's have a party. Cool.
So well done to Dale.
That's
so my
awesome.
shout out this week goes to Wendy over at Toonpish Crafts. She's a resin artist. Does some really, really cool stuff. Resin pen blanks is the video she brought out today. It was a collaboration with myself, and it's the first time she's really gotten into making pen blanks. I can tell you personally, between the messages between Wendy and myself, she was terrified of how they were going to come out. They turned beautifully. She's done an amazing job making them. So both Wendy and I both got a video on it. But I'm definitely going to send you over to subscribe to Wendy. She's a great person, puts out great content. So Toonpish Crafts and Wendy.
Fantastic. And the link is down in the description if you're looking for it. The ladies are getting the heyday today because my lady is how can I say this without women thinking I'm being male? She's got the cutest personality. This chick, I love her. I love her personality. She's just adorable. The DIY Huntress. If you guys are familiar, I don't know if you are.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll know why I'm shouting her out today, because she did something that I thought was incredibly cool. She made an outdoor table that had a concrete top on it. But in the middle of that top, she put a nice recess in it that can act as either, on chilly nights, a little fire pit in the middle of this concrete top, or on the better nights, it can act as a cooler. And she made the base out of cedar. It's an awesome video to check out. If you haven't checked out DIY Huntress, check her out. She's awesome. I love her, and I think you will too if you watch her, because she's just crazy. I love it.
Very cool.
I found that link, Chris, by the way. I've just sent it to the messages. So I do have a shout out this week, and it was the channel I mentioned earlier, and that is The Art of Boat Building. The video that Chris will link is about making a tri-square and mitre square, like the old metal blade, wooden body. And that guy is wholly responsible in a big way for my sort of hardwood and brass fetish that I had for making tools about 12 months ago, and still have as well, because they're beautiful too.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
Definitely worth a view.
Time to say adios.
Mm-hmm.
It is time to say adieu and goodbye. What's that song that they sing in the film? I can't remember the other one. I mean, everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Farewell.
That's the
adios.
one.
Good night.
Yeah. Something along those lines.
Oh,
so
God.
Until next week, when
the
I'm not
hills
going to sing.
are alive with the sound of music. Anyway, good.
Yes.
Jamie's page. Oh, sorry, I thought we was all singing.
It's the most screwed up
Thanks
musical.
for listening. I bet you wish you weren't. So in that case, we will see you next week. We'll talk about something we don't know what. You take care.
A great week, everybody.
Take it easy, everybody.
Goodbye. Farewell. Adios. Say good.
So
Whatever.
So hope he edits.
Oh God, let's end this.